So I'm going to explain a few things here with my Juno 6 that apply to any synthesizer that you have that has an arpeggio and a filter input, and even could just apply if you just have a filter input. It's ways of like expanding the filter section of any synthesizer. Now, what I have going here is I have Ableton sending a clock to my in-out dock, and in here I'm using little MIDI as a step sequencer, and I have basically a 4/4 beat going. You can see on this this dope for MIDI to CV converter on the back of it, there's a gate signal pulsing. And that is following this kick drum sound. Now, if I just turn on the arpeggio on the Juno, it's free running. It's not following anything, and you would have to, go crazy trying to get that rate just right so that it matches. First, we're going to do this first. I am going to take this gate output, and I'm just going to send it right into the arpeggiator. So we have on the beat a Juno 6 without MIDI syncing to Ableton. Now, to make this a little bit more interesting, I'm going to mix in an LFO to that. So the LFO that's on this Moger Foger right now is free running. It's not connected to this at all, but if I take the gate and run it into the pedal in, and it's going to reset that LFO on the beat. Now, since it's running faster, every time that comes in, it's going to create this little pulse, and it's kind of like a dirty sound. It's kind of cool. And you only hear it when the release is up high. And what I did is I just added more notes on my sequencer. So there are 8 notes, and then occasionally an extra note in there. Now, to make this even more interesting, I'm going to take the triangle output of this LFO, and I'm going to run it into the attenuator input, which is, the attenuator just basically allows you to attenuate or to increase or decrease the strength of a signal. So this LFO, we're going to tell it how much to affect the filter on the Juno 6. So I'm going to take the LFO, go to the in, grab the out of the attenuator, then go into the filter input of the Juno 6. It says VCF control on the back, which means voltage control filtered. So right now, now, when you have your envelope set so there's a decent amount of decay, sustain, and release, you'll hear this effect more. So that's what we're trying to go for here, is just, you want to be able to hear what you're doing with the filter. And And so this is the sound you wouldn't expect to get from a Juno 6. And if you just turn on the arpeggiator, this isn't something that's going to happen. Without affecting the filter, without affecting the arpeggiator, you're not going to get these interesting effects. And that's a really, really great tone right there. Now, if you want to just create chords and don't want to use arpeggiator, you can still do that as well. And by turning on the hold button, it's just holding that chord that I played, and it's going to be affected by the filter input, and that's going to be in time. This filter change is going to be in time with your song that you have currently running. I turn on the hold and bring the envelope up to the end of it so that the amplitude is still going for a while. The decay, sustain, and release are up higher. And you hear the filter getting that gate signal, and also gets this LFO with a triangle. So that's the smooth part, and the gate part that's coming in hard is the harder part. All of this stuff would apply to any other synthesizer, like if you have a Poly 61 or anything that has any sort of control voltage inputs on the back of it. That's the advantage of all of this, is that this sort of knowledge, you can use it with any old synthesizer. And this synthesizer, I got this for $300, and I got this control processor for a couple hundred more. So for less than a Juno 106, I'm getting something that has, a way to be controlled via MIDI. And getting things like MIDI to CV converters, it's great because it works with all this old gear that sometimes people don't want as much, or they just, if you have this old gear that's sitting around and maybe you're like, wow, the Juno 6 is great, but it's not that interesting, instead of selling it and then buying something more expensive that's maybe more complex, you can take something like a Juno and kind of expand the sound. Now this tone that I have coming in, like I can play chords. Now, it's still getting that gate signal. If I just use just the LFO, that's the sound that I'm getting. And if I add the gate into it, that's what you're getting. So anyways, I just thought that this is something I thought was kind of interesting, and it's what keeps my Juno around, because I get bored if it's just a simple Juno sound, even though it's amazing for bass lines and stuff. And these are ways to make it so it works within your computer setup in Ableton, and you could even use it live and have it synced to a live DJ set or whatever. It's I guess it just gives you options.